You are no longer a child of the mountains, no longer your father's son. The very essence of that identity has been scraped away, leaving a raw, hollowed-out space where your soul used to reside. You are a slave now, sold like a sack of grain, a transaction of flesh and future completed with the cold clink of coins. The room around you is a tomb, windowless, carved of thick, unforgiving stone, meant to trap not just bodies, but screams, to absorb them into its cold, damp heart. A single torch sputters with a dying light in the corridor beyond, its erratic dance casting warped, leaping shadows across the rough-hewn walls, making the very darkness feel alive and predatory. You're not alone. In the neighboring cells, other boys shift and stir in the gloom, young, silent shapes curled on thin, rotting straw mats. Their voices, their laughter, their very hopes were long ago swallowed by a fear so profound it has rendered them mute. They don't speak to you at first. Their communication is a language of glances, some pitying, seeing their own past horror reflected in your fresh terror, others so hollow they seem to look straight through you, their spirits already departed. Eventually, a boy not much older than you, his eyes holding the weary knowledge of decades, leans close enough for his breath to ghost against your ear and whispers a name that isn't yours, a single, alien syllable. "It will be yours now," he says, his voice a dry rustle. "Your real name is too difficult, too foreign, too dangerous to keep. The masters prefer something softer, easier on the tongue, something that doesn't remind them of the world beyond their perfumed walls." You don't argue. You barely remember your name anyway. It feels like a relic from a dream, fading fast in the harsh dawn of this new reality. The sound of it, once spoken with love, now seems to belong to someone else, a ghost you left behind in the mountains. Soon you'll learn what's expected of you. This is not a place of labor in the fields or honest sweat beneath the sun. This house, with its painted walls and serene courtyards, is far, far worse. You've been purchased for a different kind of service, a purpose that coils in the pit of your stomach like a cold serpent. The kind no child should ever be asked to perform, the kind the masters never speak of aloud, but which is enforced with gentle smiles, soft commands, and the cloying scent of scented oils that cannot mask the underlying stench of decay. Your initiation into this new world is a systematic erasure. You're washed, your body scrubbed clean not with care, but with a brutal, efficient roughness by older slaves whose eyes are permanently averted, who have learned that sight is a burden and empathy a punishable offense. You're rubbed down with perfumed oils that smell of foreign flowers, a cloying sweet aroma meant to cover the scent of fear and sweat, to make you palatable, an object of desire. Your hair is combed and arranged not for comfort, but to look more delicate, to frame a face that is no longer your own. Then you are dressed, not in the rough, honest tunics of wool you once knew, but in something sheer and gauzy, nearly transparent. It is a costume, not clothing, an invitation, not protection. It whispers against your skin, a constant, shameful reminder of your new purpose. Every path out of this gilded cage is watched by guards with expressionless faces and hard eyes. Every doorway is a threshold guarded by men who see you not as a person, but as inventory, as a potential problem. There is no escape, not in body, and soon you will learn, not in mind. Your new life doesn't begin with a ceremony or a welcome. It begins with a crushing, profound silence that settles in your bones, a silence that is louder than any scream, the silence of a soul being methodically dismantled. You learn the art of invisibility. You serve in the background of opulent rooms, watching men, powerful, polished, brilliant men, eat, drink and talk of justice, honor, and the great philosophies of the age. You learn to pour wine with a hand that does not tremble, to stand perfectly still when touched by unfamiliar, demanding hands, to curve your lips into a smile when commanded, a hollow expression that reaches nowhere near your eyes. At night, you return to your cell, the stone cold against your back. If you're lucky, no one visits. No one screams in the night. but luck is a rare and fleeting currency in this place. Each day that passes, you feel yourself slip a little further from the person you once were. You begin to forget the taste of your mother's home-cooked food, the specific color of her favorite dress, the rough, comforting texture of your father's calloused hand holding yours. Those memories are dangerous now. They are weaknesses, fissures in the armor you are being forced to forge. You try not to hold on to them because in this place, memories don't protect you. They only hurt. A sweet poison that makes the present unbearable. At first you resist. Of course you do. A spark of the mountain boy still flickers within. You flinch when hands touch you without consent. You shrink from the stairs leading to the private chambers. You try not to cry when ordered to sit, to smile, to stay. But here, resistance is simply another, more painful path to the same suffering. You learn with brutal speed that fighting back brings nothing but exquisite pain. A refusal earns you a sharp, stinging slap. A struggle gets you pinned, tied down, your helplessness made a spectacle. And defiance, true defiance, is a sentence that plays out over days in beatings, in chains, or in the whispered threats of something worse, something unspeakable. The message is carved into your psyche as clearly as the graffiti on the cell walls. Obedience might buy you a full meal, a warmer blanket, or a precious night without pain. Disobedience earns you nothing but scars, both visible and hidden. Your sleeping quarters are a physical manifestation of your status, lying deep beneath the grand halls and sunlit courtyards, down where the light doesn't reach, and the air is thick with damp and despair. A row of identical cells, each containing a sparse straw mat, a thin, ragged cloth, and a small bucket in the corner for waste. The stone walls are impossibly thick, and only later do you understand their true purpose. They are meant to swallow the noise, the crying, the desperate begging, the chilling silence that follows. It is in this underworld that you meet the other, boys who share your fate, learning their names in hushed whispers after the guards' footsteps have faded. There's Thimon, a quiet boy who flinches at sudden noises as if they were physical blows and never speaks unless spoken to, his voice a mere whisper. There's Nico, older, his arms and back a road map of lash scars, his eyes too calm, too distant, as if he has retreated to some inner fortress no one can breach. And there's Eric, barely in his teens, once the son of a merchant, sold when his family's fortune crumbled to dust. It was either this house or the streets, he tells you one night, his voice trembling. Either way, the ending would be the same, a slow erosion of self. They are the ones who finally tell you the unvarnished truth of what happens during the parties, the gatherings you've heard murmured in reverent tones as symposiums. In books and the songs of bards, they are grand intellectual gatherings, places of philosophy, poetry and wine, where learned men recline on cushions, debating the nature of the universe and the soul. But the truth is something uglier, a rot gilded in fine language. As night falls, the air in the main hall fills with the sounds of raucous laughter and the seductive strains of a lyre. Guests arrive in fine embroidered robes, their fingers heavy with gold rings, their hair glistening with perfumed oil. They speak of politics and lofty ideas. They drink sweet, potent wine from silver cups, and they feast on roasted lamb and honeyed fruit served on platters of polished bronze. At first, you are merely part of the scenery, pouring drinks, bringing plates, lighting lamps with a steady hand. But then imperceptibly the night turns. The intellectual veneer cracks. Eyes glazed with wine and entitlement begin to follow your movements with a predatory interest. Hands linger too long on your arm or your waist. The laughter grows louder, coarser. The conversations shift from ethics to crude jokes and boasts. And soon you are no longer just part of the background. You become the evening's true, unspoken entertainment. It starts small, deceptively so. A guest pats the cushion beside him and asks you to sit. Another pulls you close and strokes your hair as if you were a favored pet, a living doll. But these requests are not requests. They are commands wrapped in politeness, and they always, inevitably, lead somewhere darker, a path from which there is no return. The first time you are formally summoned to a private chamber, your heart is a frantic drum against your ribs. You don't fully understand, but your body knows, trembling with a primal dread. You're told to smile, to sit, to make small talk. The questions seem harmless, almost kind. Where are you from? Do you miss your family? Do you like it here? Then, without warning, the mask slips. A hand that rests paternally on your shoulder creeps lower, its intent clear and violating. Your voice falters and dies in your throat. You try to move away, to create a sliver of space, but you're held firmly in place, your weakness a source of their amusement. The other guests watch, some with vague interest, others with clear, dark amusement. You look around for help, for a single compassionate face, but you find none. You are alone in a crowded room. Later, lying on the cold stone of your cell, every part of you throbbing with a pain that is more than physical. The world seems to warp and bend, becoming unreal. You are not a boy anymore, not a person with thoughts and feelings. You are a thing, decorated, oiled, dressed in silk, not for comfort, but for display and consumption. They call this beauty, but it's the kind of beauty that breaks, a fragile vase shattered for the pleasure of hearing it crack. The final fracture of your spirit happens one night during a celebration more extravagant and debauched than usual. A victory over a rival city-state, they say. The air is thick enough to taste, a mixture of heavy incense and spilled wine, the marble floors gleaming, reflecting candlelight and blood-red drapery. Every corner of the villa pulses with loud voices, drunken laughter, and a palpable, hungry expectation. You are brought into the very center of this maelstrom, a prize animal presented for sport, cleaned, dressed, and perfumed, left barely clothed beneath layers of gauze meant only to entice and tease. Around you, young nobles, boys barely older than yourself, their eyes gleaming with cruel excitement, watch your every move. They wear silk and smugness like second skins. They giggle and whisper as they invent new, humiliating games, new ways to degrade the slaves placed at their mercy for the evening. They take turns barking orders, each more perverse and demeaning than the last. They score your humiliation like a contest, a twisted sport. Who can make the boy blush more deeply? Who can get him to shed a tear? Who can push him the furthest before he finally cracks and breaks? In the middle of their vicious game, as their laughter rings in your ears like funeral bells, something inside you finally, irrevocably, snaps. It is not a scream, not a sob of protest, just a slow, cold, silent slide into a profound numbness. You stop pretending to be human because you realize that very illusion, the hope of being seen, of being understood as a person, is the very thing that is killing you. It is the last, thin, frayed strand that connected you to the boy who once chased goats in green, sun-drenched pastures, who knew the sound of his mother's laughter and the clean, sharp smell of pine on the mountain air. That strand now severs, falling away into the abyss. In that moment, you become exactly what they see, a thing, not a person, a function, not a soul, a vessel for their desires. A beautifully trained machine that flinches on command and smiles when it's told to, its inner workings hollowed out. You survive by vanishing inside yourself, by building a wall between your core self and the body that endures the violations. The overseers notice the change in you. They see the perfect stillness, the immediate, unthinking obedience, the hollow serenity where there was once flickering resistance. They praise you. You are now disciplined, well-conditioned, broken in. As a reward for your spiritual death, you are moved into slightly better quarters, given cleaner clothes, more bread, even a small, high window that shows a sliver of sky. The other slaves look at you differently now, some with a bitter envy for the small comforts you receive, others with a deep, knowing sorrow. They recognize what you have become, and they understand the terrible cost you have paid to become it. You begin to observe the world as if through a thick pane of glass, detached, a spectator to your own life. You can now predict the rhythms of the guests' appetites, foresee who will demand what, anticipate the precise moment when the mood will turn from jovial to violent, and identify which guests most enjoy inflicting pain masked by a veneer of politeness. This chilling expertise is put to use when you accompany your master to the slave market once. As he haggles over the price of a new boy, he turns and asks for your opinion. It takes you a moment to understand. You are no longer just property. You have been promoted. You are now also a tool for acquiring more. You turn your dispassionate gaze upon the frightened, chained boys, assessing them with a clinical eye born of bitter experience. "This one is strong," you say, your voice flat, "but he will resist. That one is already too broken, he won't last. That one, yes," you point. "He'll last a few years if handled correctly." You speak these damning words with a blank face, but deep inside, a quiet, screaming horror rises as you hear your own voice. The ghost of your own past trauma now used to condemn another, and yet you feel nothing, a vast, icy nothingness, until your eyes land on him, a boy, maybe 13. His eyes are like yours used to be, wild, searching, full of a fire that has not yet been extinguished. His limbs are lean, his hair a messy tangle, and there, etched on his face, is a look that shatters your numb composure. Hope, not yet crushed, not yet erased by the boot of this world. The sight of him cracks something deep within the frozen lake of your being, not enough to bring tears, but enough to send a fissure through the ice. A tremor that reminds you that somewhere buried fathoms deep beneath the conditioning and the compliance, the ghost of your former self is still awake, still watching, a single unblinking eye in the dark. Morning. You know now you are a shadow of what you were, a pale imitation, a ghost in a living body. But shadows, you realize, remember the light. They are, by their very nature, a record of its absence. The next gathering you serve is a quieter, more sober affair. No raucous music, no roaring laughter, just the low, serious murmurs of debate among older, grave men in the finest of robes, philosophers, statesmen, the kind whose names will be inscribed on scrolls and whose ideas will shape the destiny of empires. You are there, of course, serving wine with the practiced, seamless invisibility that has become your only armor. They do not see you as a person. You are part of the furniture, an obedient, automated vessel that refills cups and carries trays, a non-entity. But as you glide silently between their couches, you listen, your ears attuned to the nuances of their discourse. They are discussing the very foundations of society, ethics, virtue, the nature of justice itself. One man, with a long grey beard and a resonant voice, argues passionately that some souls are born inferior, meant by nature and the gods for servitude. Slavery, he proclaims, is not merely an economic necessity, but the natural righteous order of things. Another, younger and more earnest, counters that character is not innate, but molded by experience and environment, and that even a slave could be virtuous if raised in the right circumstances. They speak with calm, academic detachment, weighing human lives and suffering as if they were abstract theories, like stones balanced in the palm of a hand, never once glancing in your direction as they clinically dissect your very worth as a human being. You don't flinch, not anymore. But inside, something turns, a key grating in a long-rusted lock. It's not just that they have stolen your body, your youth, your freedom. It's that they have stolen the very idea of what makes someone human and twisted it, contorted it into a self-serving philosophy that justifies their cruelty. These men who preach temperance and wisdom, who quote poets and pen treatises on morality, are the very same ones who, in the privacy of these halls, command you to kneel, to submit, to smile, while they systematically destroy you. Their minds are sharp enough to comprehend the truth of your suffering, but they consciously, deliberately choose to lie to themselves. They justify their base cruelty with words that sound noble, with logic that seems impeccable. That is what makes them true monsters. not ignorance but intention. You realize then, with a clarity that is both terrifying and liberating, that the system you live in isn't some ancient barbaric relic of a primitive past. It isn't the result of a simple lack of enlightenment. No, it is something far more sinister. It is brilliant. It is meticulously designed by the greatest thinkers, protected by elegant laws, polished and glorified by poets and artists. It is a masterpiece of control, a gilded cage where beauty, reason and brutality exist in a seamless, horrifying harmony. And you, broken, compliant, invisible, are both its most tragic victim and its most damning evidence. Time passes in a blur of monotonous routine. You become a ghost with duties, a spectre going through the motions of a life. You notice things with a new, detached acuity. You see how the newest boys always cry on their first night, a universal sound of shattered innocence. You see how the guests who speak the most sweetly, who compliment your eyes or your grace, often hide the sharpest, most calculating cruelty. You observe it all without reacting, a scientist studying a vile species. The pain no longer registers as pain. It is merely data, a pressure, a movement, the inevitable price of waking up to see another morning. You stand at your small window sometimes, in the fleeting moments of peace, watching the cold, distant stars through the iron bars. You remember, with the vague quality of a half-remembered story, lying under those same constant stars as a child, counting constellations with your brother, your father's calloused finger pointing out Orion's belt against the vast velvet sky. But now those memories feel like tales you once heard from a traveling storyteller, beautiful and sad, but not your own. You wonder if your family ever thinks of you, if they picture you alive, married to a good woman, maybe working in a fertile vineyard or training horses for a kind master. Do they imagine you whole? You hope with a desperate fervor that they do not, because the truth of what you have become, of what was done to you, would surely kill them faster than any sword. The philosophers' voices still echo in the chambers of your mind, their clever lies, their elegant, poisonous words. But you now carry a truth far sharper, far more real than anything they have ever spoken. A mind that chooses evil while knowing good is not wise. It is diseased. And a world built and maintained by such minds is not a civilization to be admired, but a sickness to be condemned. By now, you no longer mark the passage of time by the changing seasons or the celebration of birthdays, but by the arrival of new, frightened faces and the slow fading of old scars into pale, silvery lines on your skin. You are perhaps 25 or 23 or older. The exact number has lost all meaning. Your body is a living map of forgotten injuries, a testament to wounds that were never allowed to heal properly, reminders etched not just in memory, but into your very skin and bone. You walk with a subtle, permanent limp from a twisted ankle that was ignored. You cough constantly, a dry, rattling sound that speaks of damaged lungs, and you feel every movement like rusted metal grinding against itself. The guests who once whispered eagerly about the new exotic boy now barely register your presence at all. You are no longer desirable, no longer fresh. You are just there, a piece of the household's aging infrastructure. The end of this chapter of your life comes not with a bang, but with a bureaucratic whisper. Demetrius, the master of the house, calls you to his chambers one crisp morning. There is no particular cruelty in his voice, no flicker of sympathy either, just the flat tone of business, of asset management. "You're being sold," he says, "not to another household of a similar nature, but to a mine in the distant, unforgiving mountains, the labor camps, the place where slaves go to vanish, their lives ground down to dust. It isn't framed as a punishment, nor is it a reward. You're simply no longer worth the cost of keeping." You nod, a shallow, automatic dip of your head, not because you agree, but because nodding is easier than speaking, easier than screaming. Everyone knows the mines are a slow, grueling death sentence. The stone dust eats the lungs from the inside. Tunnel collapses come without warning, burying men alive. Beatings are constant and brutal from overseers with no patience for weakness. Meals are rare and meager, and once you pass through the gates of that pit, you do not come out. You are being sent there because you are used up, but your body is still useful enough to extract the very last drops of labor before it finally, completely quits for good. That night, in your cell for the final time, you receive a visitor. It is Marcus, one of the few who have survived alongside you from the beginning, though his path diverged long ago when he was chosen to serve the master's wife. Safer, cleaner work, still slavery, but with fewer visible wounds and a different kind of soul erosion. He says nothing, his eyes holding a universe of shared pain and understanding. He simply presses something small, cold and sharp into your palm. It is a sliver of metal, perhaps from a broken tool, small enough to be concealed in a fold of skin or under the tongue, yet sharp enough to cut a purse string, a throat or a wrist. No words are exchanged. None are needed. In a world where every single decision, what you eat, what you wear, when you sleep, when you smile, has been made for you, this single silent act of defiance, this gift of a choice, hits you with more force than any blow you have ever endured. You hold the shard all night, your fingers curled so tightly around it that its edges bite into your palm, drawing tiny beads of blood. The pain is not from the pressure, but from the memory it evokes, the memory of having agency, of being able to affect your own destiny, even if that destiny is a final one. The long night is spent in a silent, internal debate. Do you use it to try to run, a futile dash for a freedom that doesn't exist? Do you use it to strike out at a guard, a final futile act of vengeance? Or do you use it to end the suffering yourself, to take control of the one thing you truly still own, your life and the manner of its ending? As a cold grey dawn creeps through the narrow window, washing the cell in a pale, sickly light, you make your choice. You do not choose any of the obvious paths. Instead, you carefully wipe the blood from your palm and wrap the precious metal sliver in a scrap of cloth. With a quiet, deliberate movement, you hide it behind a loose, crumbling stone in the wall of your cell, in a place you have memorized. It is not your escape, but it might be someone else's. It might be the key to freedom, or the instrument of peace, for another boy who finds himself in this same darkness, staring into the same abyss. This small act is not one of surrender, but of legacy. You walk out of the house the next morning not as a man with a grand plan for escape or rebellion, but as someone who has made a fragile peace with his ending, because it is, unmistakably, an ending. There are no more fantasies of a last-minute rescue, no more illusions of a justice that will ever find you in this world. There is only the quiet, cold comfort of clarity. On the long, dusty journey to the mines, chained in a line of other discarded men, you pass through forests and small villages that stir the ghosts of your past. You see trees like the ones you climbed as a boy, streams that sparkle and remind you of endless summer days spent chasing flickering fish with your bare hands in the cool, clear water. You see families working their fields, children playing with a dog, the simple, unremarkable sound of their laughter carrying on the wind. You watch it all like a man peering through a thick, unbreakable window at a life he can remember, but will never have again. You don't cry. You haven't been able to in years, the well of tears having long since run dry. But inside, something ancient and dormant stirs, like a dying fire giving off one last soft, radiant glow before it turns to ash. You are not free. You are still in chains, marching toward almost certain death. But for the first time in a long, long time, you have made a choice that was entirely your own. And that, in and of itself, is a victory. It is something. The mine is not a place. It is a sentence, a living death. Carved deep into the side of a blackened, scarred mountain, it seems to breathe, exhaling clouds of fine, choking dust and an aura of pure despair. The air is dry and gritty, tasting of powdered stone, and it claws at your throat with every inhalation. Even your nagging cough, a companion for months, turns sharper, deeper here, a rattling in your chest that speaks of a coming collapse. The sun, that symbol of life and freedom, barely touches the bottom of the pit. Light, you learn, does not last in a place like this. It is swallowed by the sheer oppressive weight of the rock. The moment you arrive, you understand with a chilling finality that this is not about survival. This is about extraction. Not of awe, but of the very last flicker of life from your broken body. Hundreds of slaves move like ghosts through the labyrinthine tunnels, bent double, bruised, their bodies reduced to little more than bone and sinew. Their eyes, when they meet yours, tell the same story your own do, a story of loss, of pain, of a world reduced to the swing of a pickaxe and the struggle for the next breath. But in this grim, honest pit, there is a strange, terrible dignity. There are no more pretenses. You are no longer a possession to be kept polished and perfumed for the pleasure of aristocrats. You are a tool, plain and simple, one with a slow but certain expiration date. And yet, strangely, impossibly, this brutal honesty breeds a community that the perfumed house never could. In the pervasive dark, where the overseer's shouts are distant echoes, the slaves whisper. They whisper in the old languages, the tongues of mountain villages and coastal towns, languages the overseers do not understand and do not care to learn. They share fragments of half-remembered songs, the names of lost mothers and fathers, stories of sunlit fields, of fishing boats on a sparkling sea, of the smell of rain on dry earth. Every whispered word, every shared memory is an act of quiet, profound rebellion, a stubborn refusal to be completely erased from the world. There is no safety here. Death is a constant, casual companion, but there is a raw, powerful solidarity. When a man collapses from exhaustion or illness, another, with a sigh of resignation, will silently take his place at the rock face. When a portion of food is stolen by a cruel guard, what little remains is shared out again the next hour. A small piece of dried fruit, passed from one calloused, grimy hand to another, becomes more than sustenance. It becomes a ritual of remembrance, a sacrament of shared humanity. Every tiny, seemingly insignificant act of kindness is both minuscule and massive in its import, because no one expects it in this hell. And yet, against all odds, it happens. It is here that you see him, a boy, far too young for this place, his thin arms trembling as he tries to lift a pickaxe that is clearly too heavy for his frame. He reminds you of someone, a ghost from your past. You're not sure who at first, the memory flitting just out of reach. Then, with a painful clarity, you realize he reminds you of yourself, of you before you were trained, broken, and silenced. Without a word, you move to his side and help him, adjust his grip on the heavy tool, showing him how to use his body's weight, not just his frail arms. He says nothing, but he nods, a quick, grateful dip of his head. Later, he will find you, sitting at the edge of a deep shaft, your feet dangling into the seemingly bottomless dark. He will ask you, his voice small but earnest, if the stories are true, if the great city above is really filled with golden temples and towering marble statues that gleam in the sun. You tell him yes, it is true, but you also tell him the other truth, the one the stories leave out. You tell him what those golden temples are built upon, the suffering that polishes the marble, the blood that is the mortar between the stones. He listens, quiet and utterly still, not crying, not growing angry, just absorbing this terrible, essential truth that no child should ever have to carry. And in that moment, you understand. The weight you carry now is not just the burden of your own story. It is the collective weight of the stories of everyone like you, those who have suffered, who have been silenced, who have been used, discarded, and forgotten by the world above. You don't know how long you have left. Maybe days, maybe a few weeks at most. The rattling in your chest is a constant, grim timer. But you realize that while your lungs still hold a shred of breath, your story has a voice. And down here, in The deep, resonant throat of the mountain, that voice is heard. It is heard by the boy, by the fisherman's son, by the baker's apprentice. Even if the world above, with its gleaming statues and its philosophical debates, will never know your name and never care about your suffering, here in the profound dark, someone remembers. And in that memory, there is a resistance that no army can defeat and no chain can bind. In the final months of your life, the very concept of time loses all meaning and structure. There are no calendars in the mines, no markers of days or years, only the relentless, monotonous rhythm of pickaxes striking stone, the ragged weave of labored breath, and the occasional terrifying rumble of a tunnel collapse. The world has narrowed to its most elemental components: rock, dust, and the primal struggle for one more day of survival. And yet, in this hollowed-out, hopeless place, something fragile and unexpected begins to grow, like a single tenacious flower pushing through a crack in the stone. A legacy. You no longer waste energy on dreams of freedom. That particular hope was lost long ago, along with the name you were born with, and the sweet melodic language your mother once whispered in your ear as you fell asleep. But there is one final, precious thing that the overseers, for all their whips and chains, cannot extract from you, cannot mine from your soul: memory. Not just your own, but the collective memories of the others who share your fate. In snatched moments of conversation during the brief, precious rest breaks, you begin to share your story. Not all at once, never in a continuous, flowing narrative, but in small, potent pieces, passed from your lips to their ears, like precious morsels of bread offered to starving men. You speak of the olive trees of your childhood, their silvery leaves shimmering in the breeze. You describe the sound of your brother's laughter, echoing across the valley before the storm of slavers came. You recount the visceral terror of that first night in the house on the hill, the feeling of the cold, perfumed oil on your skin. You describe the face of Marcus, the boy who gave you the ultimate gift of a choice in how to end it all. The others, in turn, listen with a rapt intensity, and in return, they gift you their own stories, the faded treasures they have carried locked in their hearts. A fisherman's son from the distant islands, taken during a brutal coastal raid. A baker's apprentice from the wilds of Thrace, sold by a desperate, starving uncle for a handful of coins. A shepherd who once sang ancient, haunting melodies to his flock under the open sky, and now coughs up specks of blood into the grey stone dust. None of these stories, these entire lived realities, will ever be carved into magnificent monuments or etched into precious scrolls to be studied by future generations. But here, in the consuming dark, they are preserved. They are given a sanctuary. You begin to understand something that once seemed utterly impossible, that even in the face of total obliteration, there is meaning. Your life, though ending in this miserable pit, is not without purpose. You are dying. This fact is no longer a source of fear, but a simple, accepted reality. Your body aches with a constant, deep-seated pain. Your breathing is a labored, wet struggle. Your appetite has vanished completely. You have seen countless others fade in exactly this manner, and you know with a calm certainty what is coming. But there is a strange, unshakable peace in this knowing. You no longer need to fight for a tomorrow that will never come. Not because you have given up in despair, but because you have successfully given something away. You have passed on the torch of your story. One evening, the young boy you helped in the tunnels, he can't be more than 12, his eyes still too large for his thin face, approaches you. He asks, with a heartbreaking simplicity, if he can carry your story when you are gone. He doesn't use those exact poetic words. He just looks at you and says, "Will you tell me more about the city? The one with the golden roofs?" But you understand the deeper meaning perfectly. He is asking to become your living scroll, your walking monument. And so, you tell him everything. You hold nothing back. You describe the house on the hill with its deceptively beautiful painted walls and the soundproofed chamber rooms that no one ever talked about in the light of day. You tell him about the men with their fine, soft robes and their cruelly possessive hands. You recount the terror of the first night and the soul-deadening numbness of the nights that followed, one blurring into the next. You describe the stars, the only true beauty you were permitted, which you watched through a small barred window, your only connection to the vast, free universe outside. He listens, his young mind absorbing the horror and the history, and he says with a conviction that belies his age, "I will remember." And you believe him. That final night, you lie down on your thin pallet of rags, and for the first time in years, you sleep without the shroud of nightmares. Your dreams are not of terror and violation, but are filled with the clear, bright sounds of laughter, with visions of open, sun-drenched meadows, with goats running freely along familiar green hillsides. Somewhere, faintly, as if carried from a great distance, you hear your father's voice singing an old, comforting song. It is faint, but it is unmistakably there. When your breath finally fails you, there is no grand spectacle, no final, dramatic cry of defiance, just a gradual, gentle stillness, a letting go. But the boy is there, witnessing your passage, and he tells the others. And they in time will tell others. And so the story lives. It does not live in marble or in gold, but in the fragile yet enduring hearts of those who still endure, who still remember. This, perhaps, is the only way the truly forgotten can live on. In memory, in resistance, in the whispered names of the lost, spoken in the darkness, a quiet echo against the crushing silence of history. Centuries will pass. Empires will rise, gleam with brilliant power, and then collapse into dust. Languages will be born, flourish, and then die, forgotten. Grand buildings will crumble, their marble skeletons reclaimed by the earth. But the underlying structure of human cruelty, you realize, often survives the relentless march of time, merely changing its shape, adapting its language, refining its methods. The world that once celebrated symposiums in marble halls now applauds innovation, global trade, and digital connection in glass and steel towers. But if you peel back the glossy, high-tech veneer of modern life, the echoes of that ancient Athenian household are still there, whispering their dark tune. The same moral blind spots, the same sophisticated justifications, the same deeply held belief that suffering, when it is distanced from our view or abstracted by supply chains, is somehow tolerable, even necessary. We like to flatter ourselves that we have evolved, that we have somehow outgrown the primal savagery of our ancestors. But have we truly? Children still vanish into shadowy systems that prey upon their youth and innocence. People still work themselves to an early, silent death in factories and fields hidden from sight, so that others can sip artisan coffee and wine in curated comfort. The cruelty no longer happens exclusively in marble halls under the light of oil lamps. It happens in anonymous factories on the outskirts of cities, in the toxic, anonymous chat rooms of the internet, in overcrowded detention centers that no one in power wants to talk about. And yet through it all, we call ourselves advanced, enlightened. We speak of breathtaking progress in sterile boardrooms and prestigious universities, on polished news panels and in scripted presidential debates. We craft intricate legal systems and voluminous ethical codes for corporate conduct. We post outraged hashtags on social media. We light memorial candles for tragedies that briefly capture the public's attention. We hold well-organized awareness campaigns. But like the philosophers of ancient Athens, who argued so eloquently about virtue while violating the innocent slaves who stood mere feet away, we too have become masters of compartmentalizing our morality. We condemn the darkness only when it is convenient, only when it doesn't power the light in our own comfortable homes. We applaud art that moves us to tears while willfully ignoring the exploited hands that may have carved it under duress. We donate to charitable causes that touch our hearts while quickly scrolling past the news stories about systemic exploitation that we would rather not confront. We speak with great eloquence about human rights and personal dignity, but we rarely, if ever, question the global economic and social systems that quietly, efficiently demand someone else's ruin to maintain our own standard of comfort. Just as in ancient Greece, this glaring contradiction is not an accident. It is foundational to the structure of complex societies, because real, meaningful change would require genuine personal sacrifice. It would mean actively choosing inconvenience over comfort. It would mean forcing ourselves to see the human faces behind the cheap goods we consume, to question the very structures from which we benefit, and perhaps most uncomfortably of all, admitting to ourselves that we are not so different from the slave-owning elites we now so easily condemn in history textbooks. That boy who died coughing in the perpetual dark of a mountain tunnel will never be named in any history book. No statue will ever be built in his honor, no epic poem composed to tell his tale. But he represents something eternal and damning, the hidden cost that we, as a society, consistently refuse to see. For every museum exhibit celebrating the classical beauty of a Grecian urn, there is a story like his, deliberately erased or conveniently ignored. For every university lecture on the intellectual greatness of ancient democracy, there were thousands of voices, like his, crushed beneath its weight. Their silence, the unacknowledged foundation of that greatness. The marble shines so brightly precisely because the suffering was so effectively hidden in its long, deep shadows. And in our own time, we have only grown more sophisticated, more adept at hiding those shadows. But they are there. They are there in the effortless, thoughtless click of a buy now button. They are there in our collective silence when an injustice doesn't touch us personally. They are there in the quiet, guilty moments when we know, in our hearts, that something is wrong, and yet we choose to do nothing. We are them. They are us. The only difference is the date on the calendar. And time, as history keeps proving again and again, is never a cure for cruelty. It is only a mirror, one that reflects, if we dare to look closely and honestly, not how far we've come, but how far we still have to go before we can truly call ourselves civilized.